The onSecurity podcast aims to inform and challenge the viewer on all things cybersecurity. Our sponsor, onShore Security, is a premier provider of full telemetry cybersecurity detection via its Panoptic Cyber Defense Service and managed security solutions.
Hi, I'm Stel. I'm the CEO and founder of onShore Security, and we decided that it was time to do a podcast. We've been doing webinars for a couple of years, and we had some great discussions and realized that it was the discussion that mattered, not necessarily the presentations. Seeing what's out there, just great material. Love all you podcasters out there. But just found out that trying to narrow it down a bit and get into topics we wanted to talk about really was going to be valuable. And we've been asked a few times, especially when we've had some of those webinars that did that. So I've got with me, Josh Ecklow, who's going to be our producer. Say hi, Josh.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, great. And for our inaugural episode, we have Steven Kent, who is the CTO of onShore Security. Say hello, Steve.
Hello.
Great. Well, let's get into it. Today, I wanted to talk about something Steve and I kind of like go back and forth a lot, and sadly, we can go ad nauseum about it, but we're going to really try to keep it short for you all. The intersection of compliance and security, and understanding that the goal of compliance should be risk management. I certainly got some pet peeves kind of about this, and I get asked about this a lot with customers, and I find it hard to kind of, convince people, I guess, of how important this really is. But let's go ahead and get into the kind of the framing here. So, Steve, give me your kind of, brief description. Like, how do we define risk? What was a nice kind of in a can kind of way?
When we talk about risk in general, but in cybersecurity specifically, what we're usually talking about is the likelihood of an event and then how much impact it will have on the organization. So it's usually a factor of those two things, a multiplier. Okay. So a chance that something bad will happen might be very small, but the impact of that would be enormous.
Okay, so
would be potentially a medium or high risk depending upon your organization.
So it's kind of like it's got like an exposure component, it's got a likelihood component, it's got an impact component. Now, impact, isn't necessarily the immediate impact. There's the post-impact, like recovery, whatever. I mean, so what other? Is any other thing that mixes in there? What about like impact could be impact is a bigger topic, like
reputation. Right. So impact could be anything from the impact to the organization to be able to carry out business. It could be an impact to the reputation of the business. Yeah. It could be an impact to the productivity of the business.
Yeah.
Impact can be a lot of different things.
Okay, so go ahead. Sorry. Yeah,
but you have to decide when you're looking at your organization and what you do, what your business is. Obviously, different businesses have different concerns about impact.
Yeah.
So you may believe, for instance, it's not necessarily as impactful if, some of your documents are exposed publicly. If you're, a flower shop or something like that. Whereas if you are a healthcare provider, exposing that PHI data may be very impactful.
I also like to use the flower shop as the the archetypical organization that you wouldn't think has much risk. But we have compliance for these things supposedly, right? I mean, I thought compliance should be able to kind of tell us, dictate us, encourage us, whatnot, to do things to mitigate risk. So how does compliant mitigate or manage risk?
So when we talk about compliance, we're usually talking about a set of frameworks that have been devised by different organizations, whether it's the U.S. government or by credit card providers or by banking regulators or state regulators. They will provide guidelines for compliance, right? So whether we're talking PCI, DSS, we're talking about NIST, we're talking about ISO internationally, these are really frameworks that
Mhm.
are there to help you mitigate risk. They're to call out specific areas of business operations
Mhm.
and ask you to examine each one of those with regards to, potential impact and potential exposure.
Well, but then how do they magically know or overlap or intersect with the risk you have? Again, risk being not just the exposure but the
Right,
likelihood, the impact, whatever. Or I
right.
mean, let me put it in a little different way. What's the danger of having a compliance centric approach, that checkbox kind of mentality?
So there's compliance as it should be used, which is as this guide and function of mitigating risk, right? So what we do on the ground is we use compliance to say, we care about things like access control, because access control lets us give a set of controls to who has access to what data, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then there's compliance as a lot of organizations utilize it, which is as a burden, as a checkbox, as of saying, "Hey, I'm doing work for Department of Defense, so I need to be NIST 171 or CMMIC compliant or CMMC compliant. So I'm just going to go through this form here and check these boxes because I've done this once in 5 years, and now I've checked these boxes. And
No.
does that get you, you know, are you officially compliant in that you've checked the boxes? Yeah, but you've not mitigated any of the risk.
All right. Well,
So again, these compliance is a tool to help you manage risk. It's perceived as a burden by a lot of
right,
organizations,
right,
and that's a
right.
problem.
I mean, even I think when people are, I don't want to say use the word more genuine, but let's say more kind of less cynical about it, and they don't just want to like be left alone and check the check boxes, whatever they have to do, but actually take them seriously. Even when they do that, and say, okay, there's still, I think, this misperception that compliance is security or compliance is risk mitigation. That, oh, if I'm giving these guidelines, this is the right things kind of I need to do too. So I think the danger is doubly. I do think I agree with you. The number one thing is that cynicism that's there. Like this doesn't really matter. Okay, and I think they're totally wrong. But whatever. But part of the reason I think they're allowed to be cynical is because the next set of people that say it does matter still kind of it's not enough, it's not good enough, it's not tuned enough specific to their needs to really be more than a guideline and a framework. I mean, to me, like the highest value is at least there's an audit trail. That's the thing I appreciate about compliance, and I try to push a lot. It's like, look, I mean, it's not you're mad, not you're it's more than a checkbox, but you're not magically secure. But these guidelines are valuable, and that a lot of it is about just because making sure you're doing certain things at minimum, and more importantly, making sure you have kind of data about this, so you kind of your stance better if you follow these guidelines, even if they themselves are not good enough. Which I want to talk about too. So but that's right. To me, the danger is double. It's not just like that cynicism that exists out
So
there.
are you suggesting there's kind of a false sense of security? If
That's yeah. I mean,
if I check the boxes, then somehow I believe I'm secure.
oh well. Yeah. Worse than that, in some cases, a lot of people in business think of it in terms of like insurance almost. That um, especially if they hire a provider, to do that stuff for them, and it insures them against kind of something or another. I think honestly, I think it's hard for people to really understand risk from the get go. But I do think the cynicism lies more comes more from exactly where we're talking about, in that
And I
that
guess
there's
I'm
this
not sure
false,
that it's cynicism as much as it is
yeah,
deprioritizing. I mean, I work with a lot of clients um, who are, they have their businesses they need to run. And security and compliance is not the business they're in.
of
You
course, right,
know,
right, and that's
so
typically the case. Yeah,
operationally, your business needs to reach its business goals. Compliance is often seen as a diversion or an impedance to those goals.
yeah, I call that cynical. You don't call that cynical?
No, I think it's the nature of business is to focus on business. And businesses have historically mitigated risk by purchasing insurance.
Yeah,
Sorry about that. So the goal, so traditionally businesses have mitigated risk by purchasing, you know, property insurance or insurance for key employees, and it's not been as the other, other than in within accounting controls, there's not been a lot of risk
yeah,
mitigation.
yeah.
That 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 aspect of accounting controls is fairly old, but for whatever reason, people don't look at kind of IT or cybersecurity controls in the same way that they look at accounting
Yeah, and
controls.
I think they should. I think that's the best model, actually, or to look at or to draw from.
I think you're right. And I think maybe with this new wave of ransomware, people are starting to realize, yeah, there's actual monetary exposure and operational
Right, right, right,
exposure
right. Yeah.
that has not been prioritized until
Well, well,
recently.
we're yeah, we're getting into kind of like kind of how do you do better, but why do you think it's hard for people? I mean, we're talking mentality, but tactically, I don't know what's a big obstacle. I mean, if somebody got over the hump of, okay, I get it, this has to be a process that we embrace, that we collect data on, whatever. I mean, that why do they find that so daunting? Why
Well,
isn't that naturally an organization wanting to do that?
I think there are a few reasons. One is that the way control frameworks are written are a little intimidating. They're
Mm.
very wordy, and they're very because they're trying to be as generic as possible for as many organizations
Yeah,
as
that's
they
kind of the
can be.
flaw I'm describing about. Yeah, and he was gone. Yeah,
So there's that. It's also the fact that you know you need to dedicate resources and time to it. And again,
yeah,
that makes it a commitment, or like any other kind of risk mitigation, there's a cost related to it, whether
yeah,
that's,
yeah.
hey, I'm bringing in an outside audit firm to check my books on a yearly basis, or yeah, I'm setting I have controls in place to make sure I've got checks on my on my account signers and
Yeah,
things.
yeah, and I would argue it's definitely the executive level, not just the management level, that really has to participate, and those are tough resources to grab. So it's slow, and I would think
Right.
that's
Well,
an
the
obstacle. Yeah,
executive level certainly needs to sign off on things. Operationally, you have to get those controls in place.
yeah, yeah. Well, help me to understand too, or later, in our audience, of course, how much does it matter? I'm specifically talking about getting through, setting the priorities, carving out the time, understanding this is important, understanding it's going to take time, understanding that it's tedious. How much does it matter? What's the value they're going to get? How much of a benefit is there, or how much danger is there if they don't set these priorities?
Well, again, I mean, now you're talking about quantifying a risk. So it depends a great deal on the organization. Most organizations that need cybersecurity programs, you know, can't function properly without those IT resources being available. So I would argue the risk is fairly substantial. You know, a breach of some kind which impacts either business reputation or operations, that there's at this stage those are fairly high risks for most organizations.
Okay, but you're talking about like risk and cybersecurity risk. I'm talking about compliance. How much does compliance matter in that to that company? Understanding that compliance
but compliance is just a tool to help you mitigate risk. Now, you may, as a business operator, you may be under governance from an organization that demands you meet a certain compliance, right?
Mm-hmm.
But even if you're not, let's say you just make a widget.
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense for you to be at least like NIST 171 compliant. I would argue yes, definitely.
Okay.
Because the impact to your business of at least not following those guidelines and saying, I've put these controls in place and I audit these controls on an annual basis.
That makes a difference.
Without doing that, your risk of a malicious actor or of some other force impacting, business operations or business reputation is significant.
Okay. So I see. So we can't magically make all these compliance frameworks be specific to any particular organization. It can't calculate kind of impacts and costs and whatnot. It can't even necessarily identify exposure, but it's very powerful as a framework and a guideline and a collection of data and attestation and whatnot, so that it does matter. It does matter to be compliant, even though you're not done, going through that process. It is
right.
Value.
I mean, they're again, frameworks will give us kind of some best practices. So the new NIST framework will give us best practices of what should password length and password rotation and password policy be. Great. It will give us some guidelines there. Will it say, if I put this in, does it say, if I put this password policy in place, now I am secure? No. What it's saying is, if I put this password policy in place and I make sure that it stays in place, yearly, I've reduced the risk of password compromise.
Yeah, and I think that's a nice, good, clear examples that I really think is kind of lost a lot at the kind of leadership level, that compliance isn't itself security, but I totally agree, and we should end on that point. It is very valuable and should be prioritized, and frankly, helps guide and dictate, subsequent, activity. Well, Steve, thank you. This is awesome. I know that you and I are have a lot of topics that we have discussed and can discuss, and so we'll do it again. Josh, thanks for being Mr. Producer. It's wonderful, and thank you, audience, for joining us. And we'll, and okay, we'll see you next episode.
Thank you very much.